Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the American Juche Study Group. My name is Noah Shank, and I am the founder of it. I'm a Korean American, and I'm an anti-imperialist activist with the Center for Political Innovation. I'm also the editor of this text, Juche for American Workers, Volume 1, which compiles many of the writings of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-Il, and has been the text for our weekly study sessions. The American Juche Study Group is a broad initiative including people of all races, religious backgrounds, and political affiliations who are interested in learning the ideology of the Korean Revolution. We bring with us a spirit of intellectual charity and goodwill toward all humankind. We refuse to accept the hateful caricature of North Korea presented in American media and instead want to learn the ideas that have held the DPRK together for so long, enabled it to withstand circumstances that would most certainly cause any other government on the planet to fall. We share one goal, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula in the context of a world without war and poverty, in which every nation is enabled to grow and thrive to its fullest potential. We ask that if you are studying with us today, if you could please send a small $5 contribution to help support our work. Funds are urgently needed to maintain the important work towards peace, prosperity, and multipolarity that we do at the Center for Political Innovation. And nobody does more to support the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK, North Korea in the United States than the Center for Political Innovation. Not only running this Juche group, we've published several books, around the Kim Il-sung flower. We have done more than any other group to support reunification of the Korean peninsula. So without further ado, so this week, so we've gotten through the entirety of Juche for American Workers Volume 1. And don't worry, I know people are anxiously waiting. They just can't wait to get their hands on some more Juche. So Juche for American Workers Volume 2 will be out soon. And there's going to be some great essays in there. We found some essays about party building. There was a great essay written by Kim Jong-Il in the 1990s after the Pyongyang Declaration that I found recently that we'd like to include. There's some great essays on the philosophical aspects of the Juche ideology, some dialogues between American socialists and folks from the DPRK. It's going to be a great text. I don't want to spoil too much about what's in there. Also some more stuff on religion and other stuff that Americans might find interesting to learn about the DPRK because it's been so light about. But this week, because we've gotten through that text, I just thought that we could do some Juche maxing together, and what do maxing streamers do? They do just chatting streams, right? And they react to content. We're going to be lazy live streamers this week, and we're going to react to content. But I'd like to put what we're about to react to in a little bit of context. So last Monday was the anniversary of Korea's victory, North Korea's victory in the Korean War. The anniversary of the victory of the DPRK over the United States in the defense of the Fatherland War. It's a huge deal for the Korean people, for particularly North Korea. And as such, they've been holding events. and our friends, good friends of the Center for Political Innovation. I know Caleb has long time done a podcast with the Brars. We've had them speak at several of our events. Our friends at the CPGBML, who we do have our differences with, but who are great allies, great anti-imperialists. They did an event with an ambassador from the embassy of the DPRK in Britain, where he just sort of gave a statement. So gave a speech, a statement about where the DPRK is at. And I just thought, why not react to it this week? We could do some reaction content. So if you want to, we'll pause intermittently and just discuss what they're talking about. I thought that would be a good way to spend this week's session. So yeah, why don't we get it started?
So Noah, why don't you have to tell me when to stop, when you want to pause and stop for discussion, okay?
Yeah, and I think that goes for everybody. If anybody has anything to add at any point, just be like, hey, just stop. Yeah.
And Comrade Ranjit Brar and Comrade Ella Rule, long friend of the DPRK, dear distinguished guests and dear comrades and friends. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my revolutionary greetings in the name of the DPRK Embassy in London to leadership and all the party members of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, and all the supporters of DPRK in the UK. July 27, 2026 marks the 73rd anniversary of victory of the Korean people, achieved in the Fatherland Liberation War by repulsing armed invasion of the US and its satellite forces. In that war, the 2-year-old DPRK defeated the US, which boasted of being the strongest in the world. It was a miracle unprecedented in history. The victory of the war
Why don't we pause?
The victory in the war was a fruition of great.
Yeah, I don't think this is an achievement that is talked about enough. I mean, the DPRK was a tiny country, a very small, ethnically homogenous country that has, Korea has historically been under the domination of country after country after country. And this tiny, tiny country was able to defeat what was at that time considered to be the most advanced military power on the face of the planet. And they sacrificed millions of people in doing so. I mean, it's just it's an unbelievable achievement, and it's something that's really, really downplayed. I've noticed that a lot of like defenders of U.S. imperialism in school. I hear this a lot. They try and act like they downplay the losses of U.S. imperialism. I hear this about the Vietnam War a lot as well. They'll say like, oh well, yeah, technically we lost the Vietnam War, but if you think about it, we didn't really lose because we killed so many Vietnamese people, and like our casualties compared to the Vietnamese people, it's like, we killed a lot more people, so therefore it's like it's not really a loss. And if America hadn't been such a if we had the implication is like if we were just more brutal and didn't care as much about like the suffering of other people, then that would just be a great thing. And I mean, just like what a ridiculous thing to think. I mean, first of all, I mean, that really, that shows this is a common attitude that the U.S. imperialists have about war. It's like they don't have a conception of a strategic objective, right? And I noticed that too. For them, it's like about you clear a territory and then you like kill a bunch of people, right? And then you move on. That was the same thing at the beginning of the special military operation, right? Like the NATO-backed forces, they would like clear a territory and kill a bunch of people and then move on while they were being encircled by the Russian troops, right? And they would point to that and be like, see, look, Ukraine is winning. But like, they don't understand that there's like a long game going on. And there's like this attitude that like strategic objectives don't really matter. And all that matters is that like we kill a lot of people. And they talk about, could folks comment on that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's super wicked. I mean, and obviously people are welcome in this group regardless of their opinion on Operation Z and Russia and Ukraine, because this is a Korea-focused group. But I will say that in the middle of the war, Putin has reached out to the Ukrainian leadership and tried to make a peace deal. And this idea that Putin is the next Hitler trying to take over Western Europe is so ridiculous and contrary to the facts. And I just, the Russians have done everything they can to evacuate people to safety, to only hit military targets. They have entire unarmed teams that are helping people for medical purposes and things like that. And whereas Ukraine is bragging about killing and terrorizing Russian civilians. And I just wish that more Americans heard the Eastern perspective on that. But go ahead, that's a tangent.
I mean, one of the big problems, I think, is that we are indoctrinated since we're children to view killing and death like a video game. It's all kind of a game. And even when we see war films, you don't really see it with the blood and guts, and it's very sanitized, even at its worst.
Yeah, and I think that our position is the moderate position because we want a peace treaty now. Whereas, I think that it is important, like you're saying, not to see war as a video game. And I think people especially on the pro-Western side, but even on our side, it's possible to be too much into that direction.
Right. And then, sorry, go ahead, Caleb.
I was just going to say, I thought since we're talking about this, one way to illustrate this, there's a video called The Korean War in 1 Minute that shows a map of the peninsula. And that might kind of illustrate how massive the victory of the Korean people was. Shall I put that on?
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing to put on.
Yeah, hold on. Let me Korean War 1 minute. Yeah, I wanted to pull that up because I actually thought that was probably, for me, watching this video that just kind of shows where the lines were throughout the entire war in 1 quick minute, just kind of shows you how overwhelmingly China and North Korea defeated the United States. I mean, it was a very, very epic defeat for the imperialists. So, yeah, just Korean War in 1 minute. We'll silence it there. You can just watch it.
Yeah, and as you can see, originally, right, they push all the way south, almost taking the entire peninsula, because the South Koreans saw the North Koreans as their brothers, and they didn't want the Sigmund regime. And it wasn't until the U.S. and NATO interfered and essentially forced, the South to, to participate in the war on the side of the Sigmund regime, the military regime, that they were able to push up towards the 48th parallel.
Yeah.
But sure, hey, we can just vote for socialism, right?
Zoran's going to get in there, and he's going to put down the Kuomintang.
Yeah. Yeah. Just beginning there, it was just a huge surge, right? And then the United States and their forces got involved, right? And then China got involved, and then it just kind of stayed there for a little while, and it kind of hovered around the DMZ, area for the rest of the conflict. But yeah, the wild thing was, though, that was the issue in the Korean War, was that the North Koreans, what we call the North Koreans, the Korean Workers' Party, just wanted democratic elections. They just wanted the right to be part of the coalition government. They were advocating a peaceful road to socialism. They just wanted to be part of the coalition of anti-fascists, and the USA was not going to allow it. And so, and then when they massacred the people in the South and all of that, they had no choice. And it's not clear who fired the first shot, but they intervened after the U.S. backed military dictatorship in South Korea was exterminating the people that were still protesting for free elections. And yeah, I mean, it's wild. And that they wanted to just join a coalition government. It's the same with China, with the civil war in China. Right. They wanted to join a coalition government, and they were blocked from doing so. And so they were kind of forced to take up arms, and they did everything they could to avoid civil war. And the agreement was that there should be a peninsula wide election after the Second World War. And there never was one.
Yeah. And that furthermore, I mean, I'm sorry. The Syngman regime was wildly unpopular, and we're often told. First of all, they tell us that that the North Koreans were the aggressors. I mean, that's blatantly false. And even if it were true, I mean, how do you aggress against your own country? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well,
You know,
North
we
Korea
established.
invaded South Korea, don't you know? That's how it's always taught, right? North Korea invaded South Korea at a time that the countries hadn't even been divided, right? So how does that like? But that's what we're all told. Well, the Korean War started because North Korea invaded South Korea. Like, think about that, right? There was no divide. Like, yeah, it's wild.
Right. It's just like that. You know, Lincoln and them Yankees. They just decided to march on Dixie and Captain Butler. You know.
The War of Northern Aggression, yes.
Yeah, it was a war of northern aggression, the
Yeah.
global war of aggression. Those Northerners, they're always up to no good.
Yes.
You know, and that also because it was such a profound embarrassment for the U.S. imperialists. It's to this day they call it the Forgotten War, right? It's like a footnote in history. Oh, and then we killed 20% of the Korean population. Pilots were returning to base complaining that they had nothing left to bomb. Just destroyed any building over 3 stories tall. And in spite of that, the profound resilience of the Korean people under Kim Il Sung, you know, to be able to 2 years, you know, after the war was over, to be able to have schools running again, and to be able to, you know, to have the fastest growing GDP on the planet. I mean, just it's hard to not be in awe of that achievement, and they try to take that away from the people of Korea and act like, oh well, you know, everybody was just starving ever since the Kim family came to power. You know, they make it seem like, oh well, yeah, the war technically never ended and we weren't defeated. It's just a frozen conflict, right? Anytime the imperialists lose a war, they just try and like freeze the conflict, and they have their like military junta that has like an outpost in some area. You know, it's what they do. Like, you know, the Kuomintang, right? They fled to the island of Taiwan, right? And you know, then they just freeze the conflict there. And at various points within negotiations during the special military operation, you know, Biden floated, oh, we'll just freeze the conflict. We'll just freeze the conflict so that we can always have that threat on your border. And I mean, I just think increasingly people are not going to be putting up with it.
Well, that's interesting. You know, there's like, for example, there's like South Ossetia.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like that's a section of, you know, Georgia says it's Georgia, and they're like the pro-Soviet wing of Georgia that like refuse, you know, and that actually in a lot of the former Soviet territories there are like little places like that. Like there's another place in Europe too, and there's South Ossetia is the region of Georgia that is like aligned with Russia and was like the pro-Soviet region that doesn't recognize the Georgian government, right? And there's a couple others, like isn't there a place in, I forget where, in like near Romania or something, that's like the pro-Soviet. I can't remember which one it is. It's one of these very small regions that is like still like it's a pro-Soviet holdout from one of these countries. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I can't think of it. Maybe Jessica or Gavin would know.
Yeah.
Is it Moldova?
No, I don't
No,
think
Moldova
so.
is pretty pro-Western.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. No.
Yeah.
Oh well, it's not. But yeah,
Yeah.
they love to like freeze the conflict, and like there's like a it's like a weird holdout of the Cold War ideology. But we can continue.
Comrade Kim Il Sung's Juche-oriented military ideas, brilliant strategies and tactics, and outstanding leadership, as well as the will to defeat the enemy, unparalleled bravery and mass heroism displayed by the Koreans, who were firmly rallied around him. Comrade Kim Il Sung did not only defend the prestige, honor, and sovereignty of the DPRK, but also firmly safeguarded the peace of humankind by checking and crushing the US strategy for the world domination and preventing another world war. His exploits will shine generation after generation. Today, the cause of the great leader is being carried forward under the wise leadership of the respected Comrade Kim Jong-un. Thanks to his leadership, the national power and prestige of the DPRK have been elevated to the highest level, and our revolution has entered a new era of comprehensive national revivals. In last February, 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea was held in Pyongyang. At the party congress, the great Comrade Kim Jong-un was once again elected as General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea, reflecting the collective will of the entire party and
Can
entire
we pause here
Korean
for a sec?
people.
Can we pause here for a
During-
sec? Okay, so I've noticed. So yeah, in February, Kim Jong-Un was reelected ahead of the General Secretary of the Workers' Party, right? And so of course, all of the Western propaganda media outlets had to run stories about how, well, obviously the elections are rigged because he had 90 some odd % of the vote. And it's like they this is a common thing with Western media outlets. It's like they don't understand how new democracy works. Right. And it's like when a president like Xi gets reelected with like a huge majority of the vote, or a president like Kim Jong-un, it's like, well, it's like a tiered system. Like new democracy, like how it works is, right, you have the people, they elect their local officials, right? And the local officials are voting for like representatives on national boards, and then the national board, they all come together and they decide the party line, and then they uniformly elect somebody who represents their interests. And that just because somebody has like 99 or 100% of the vote, that doesn't mean that like literally everybody in the country voted for them. That like, and North Korea doesn't even claim that's how it works, but like it's presented in Western media like, oh, Kim Jong-un is such a crazy person. He just claims that he got 110% of the vote. It's like this, they're playing on the willful, like the ignorance of the American people and making it seem like it's this crazy system. And also, I think that it's, it's another thing is like Americans can't conceive of a politician who is popular enough to get consistently reelected. They do the same thing with like Putin. It's like Putin gets like 60, 70% of the vote, 80% of the vote. And people are like, oh, that proves he's rigging the elections. It's like, well, it could just be that he's like actually improved the living standards of,
Well, there's more to it than that. I would say it's a deeper level. For example, like, why is it that Kim Jong-un, whose father was Kim Jong-Il, whose grandfather is Kim Il-sung, as the leader, that was to make a political statement that they are still the Korean Workers' Party, that nothing has changed, right? That every time a new leader comes in a socialist country, they try to say, oh, this is going to be the Gorbachev who's going to bring it down. So by putting Kim Jong-il into power, they were saying, no, it's not going to be a Gorbachev. This is the son of Kim Il-sung, and the bloodline is a really, really important part of traditional Korean culture, etc. And then Kim Jong-un, it's also the bloodline. It's saying we're the same country, and that Kim Il-sung was like the George Washington or the Ho Chi Minh or the Robin Hood of the Korean people. And it was about keeping his revolutionary line alive. That's the one thing. The other thing is that, in America, politics is a dog and pony show, right? The politicians come out and they do this stupid song and dance, and they gossip about each other, and they point fingers, and they do this stupid dog and pony show. And instead of all of us trying to be the best citizens we can be in America so that we can make the leader proud of us, instead they act like the biggest fools they can possibly be, so that we, being the stupid populace, will vote for them rather than the other guy, right? And that democracy in the West has become this kind of vulgar thing where we've lost any concept of statecraft. Everybody is not qualified to run the government. I'm not a doctor. I could not do surgery. And even if I could win a popularity contest, if you had a heart attack and they needed someone to do heart surgery, I might be the best guy in the room who you could have a beer with, and I'm just a really great guy, and I can tell great stories about football, but I shouldn't be doing heart surgery on you because I don't know how to do it, right? And that being the leader of a country is like being a doctor, or it's like being a surgeon, or it's like being a lawyer. It's something you take seriously, and that's called statecraft. And that the way that the Korean Workers' Party, just like the Communist Party in China, just like these political parties are set up, it's like to train you in the art of statecraft so that you're qualified to actually run the country. And you're not qualified to win a popularity contest. You're qualified because you've shown through your abilities that you can actually do it. Xi Jinping, the reason he's the leader in China, for example, is because he started at the lowest level and he doubled the incomes of all the people in the district that he lived in, right? He had the results, right? And and that, you know, the way we think of democracy in the West, it's become this kind of vulgar thing, whereas democracy is the rule of the people, but there's also an element of getting the job done. And that you know, and that the reason, like, for example, like, you know, Putin is wildly popular is because he got the job done, and he studied, and right, he has a doctorate, and he wrote his academic thesis about how to fix Russia's economy, and he did it. And this Western conception of democracy that we have, it's really divorced from how a government should be run. And when we all know at the end of the day, that's not really who runs things, right? Trump isn't really running the country. And Biden had dementia. He wasn't really running the country. He won the popularity contest. He did the dog and pony show, and we voted for him. But he wasn't the one actually running the country. The people who run the country are behind closed doors, the deep state and the big monopolies, and they win no matter who wins the silly popularity contest they have us go to once a year. That's my thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, oh, Jessica, go ahead. No, you haven't spoken in a while.
Oh, you just muted. You just
muted yourself.
Oh, sorry, my dog was barking. I just wanted to say quickly, what's Trump's qualifications? He was bailed out by the Rothschilds. They bailed him out in Atlantic City, and then they made him a reality star on a program that they produced. There you go, dog and pony show.
Yeah.
Right, and that we have these politicians that that are not really in charge. They're really good at smiling. I mean, and at this point, right, it's like we don't even have politicians who are good at putting on the face, and it's like people so much see through the facade that it's like they elect like the least qualified, most horrible person they can possibly think of, because to them it's so meaningless, right? That's why many people voted for Trump. They were like, oh, well, yeah, you talk to a lot of the people who voted for Trump, well, they were like, well, yeah, he's done all these bad things. Well, yes, he's been convicted of sexual assault. Yes, you know, he's gone bankrupt X amount of times. Yes, he did all these horrible things the first time he was elected, but at least he's honest about it. You know, at least he's not trying to lie to me. And that too, right? They talk about technocracy, right? And you know, we have this academic system in the West that likes to pretend like we have this sort of technocratic meritocracy where you're like going through the university system, right? To, you know, prove your ability to, you know, have a laptop class job and work at these NGOs and really set the policies. Right. But in China and in the DPRK and in Russia, you have like actual meritocracies where people who are actually good at improving the lives of their constituency are elevated to a higher position, people who are actually capable of doing the job. Whereas even our quote unquote meritocratic, technocratic institutions, it's not about that. It's about being popular to your professors, right? It's about proving that you are not free-willed enough, I guess you could say, that you are conforming enough to say what the professor wants to hear. It's, you know, we have like a two-tiered popularity contest, where on the one hand, yes, the people who are actually running the country, or the people who pretend to run the country, yes, they win a fake popularity country. But even our technocrats, right, the people behind the scenes, are sort of shadowy elites. They're also winners of popularity contests through these institutions, right? That, you know, they're popular among their midwit professors and our midwit institutions. So,
speaking about, you know, voting and popularity, I mean, only 22% of the population that was eligible to vote even voted in the last presidential election. So how democratic is that? That means that 3 out of 4 people, they didn't make any decision, because you know what? Like you said, Noah, they see through all of this. So not democratic at all.
And also, I have made the point that anti-imperialist countries are more democratic in the literal sense of the word than any Western country is, for the simple reason that democracy means the rule of the people. And if you go to North Korea, the population is very, very heavily involved in governing. If the people weren't out in the streets every day, if there weren't people from the Korean Workers' Party in every neighborhood and every farm and every apartment building waking up every day and saying, it is my job to enforce the will of the Korean Workers' Party in my neighborhood, they would fall. They rely on a very, very well-organized and highly involved population. And the same thing is true in Iran, these Basij councils they have in every neighborhood. The same thing's true in Cuba. They call them CDRs, Committee to Defend the Revolution. And in Nicaragua, they call them citizens power councils. And this comes from, the Soviet Union. These were Soviet. Soviet means council, these kind of local community bodies where the population is very heavily involved in governing. Whereas in the West, we're not involved at all. In fact, they want to keep us as not involved as possible. So yes, maybe the level of civil liberties isn't the same, but when it comes to actual participation and involvement in North Korea, the population is way more involved in governing. So that's more democratic because the people are ruling, if you put it that way.
Right. And the Demos Kratos, I mean, it's not only rule of the people, but rule of the common people specifically of average people, not of the elites as well. But yeah,
I also want to bring up the fact that it cost $80 million to run for mayor of Newark. Okay, yeah, think about that. Okay, yeah, democracy. Yeah, democracy.
Right, and is Ras Baraka still the mayor?
Yes, he is.
Okay, well, there you go.
But that's how much it costs him to get in.
I don't know if he does, but
well, he doesn't, but no, his backers do. Also, like in New York City, right? How much is the last election? I think also more. I think 85 million. I mean, it's just come on.
Yeah.
Well, what a joke.
Indeed.
Anyway, I think we can proceed with the video. We got a lot to get. It's like 10 minutes.
Of the 8th Party Central Committee, the decision was made and boldly carried out to bring about a comprehensive advancement of socialist construction in order to stabilize the people's living standards and deliver tangible benefits and build an advanced state regardless of how difficult or unfavorable the objective and subjective conditions were. As a result, material foundations for production growth were solidified, and sectors that have previously stagnated began to return to normal operational tracks. Initiatives to fundamentally resolve agricultural issues were launched. Furthermore, socialist policies aimed at the people's well-being were expanded, and over 110,000 households of farmers moved into new homes.
Yeah, can we just stop that right there? Yeah, 110,000 people just moved into brand new homes this year in the DPRK. Can you imagine if something like that were to happen? Imagine the level of wealth that would have to be created to accomplish something like that. I mean, and that this is a country that is responding to an actual housing shortage, and they've been having a housing boom. CNN ran a story recently. They said that it was that they were going through Pyongyang and it was looking like Pyonghattan, they said, because they've been building these luxury homes for ordinary people. Pyongyang and the cities of the DPRK are just growing and growing and growing. Oh, and yes, in the chat, I am half Korean. My mother was born in Seoul. My dad is American. But they've just been building all of this infrastructure, all of these homes. And we hear all the time in the United States that we have a quote unquote housing shortage. That's what we're constantly told. We have a housing shortage. Well, we don't have a housing shortage. We have, I believe the statistic is we have 10 homes for every one homeless person, or it's something even higher than that even. Jessica, she's worked at the census. I know. Are you familiar with the statistic?
Yeah, I think it's 8 houses for each homeless person. It's really obscene. And I'm going to say something. 110,000 new homes, but in the United States, they're getting rid of public housing. So we have the opposite. We've just made 110,000 people homeless here.
Yeah.
While they're building new houses. Yeah, the people who were evicted from their homes in New Orleans during Hurricane, was it Katrina? Half of them is still homeless to this day. And there was nothing wrong with the public housing. They just wanted them out. And it was very open about it. HUD said we don't want these people here because they can organize. We can't have Black people organizing for better working conditions. I mean, come on. I mean, the level, it's just incredible.
Yeah, the quote, the government official said, "We wanted to fix public housing in New Orleans, and God did it for us." That was the quote that was used. But yeah, Tim had something, I think.
Well, yeah, it's groups like YIMBY groups and all these supposedly pro-development groups that are funded by tech bros and stuff like that. They keep on saying we don't have enough houses, but the reality is that we have a lot of houses, but they're speculated on. They're basically owned by large scale investors and no one lives in them. So it's a misallocation of housing.
Yes, and if you look at the plans, they're very sneaky about the way that they talk about housing investment. I looked at Kamala Harris's plan to respond to our quote unquote housing shortage, right? And they talk about, well, we need to build more affordable housing. That's the word they use. We need to build more affordable housing. Right. And that sounds good. You know, if you're somebody who's struggling to make your rent, right? If you're somebody who can't afford to buy your first home and you hear, wow, we're going to allocate all these resources to build affordable housing. Well, if you look at the laws around and the regulations around what is considered affordable housing, it's based on the median income of that district already. Right. And then they allocate that for very expensive districts. So what ends up happening is that you essentially have a handout to these massive real estate companies to build more luxury housing to speculate on, and nobody lives in it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. The idea that we can't have public housing. I mean, look at what the DPRK has been able to accomplish. Look at the real estate boom that they have had. I mean, we should be the idea that we should look on this country and scoff at it or look down on it or want to go to war with it. No, we should be learning from the people of Korea. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, we can move on, but unless people have more to add.
I just wanted to add that Mayor de Blasio, the reason he became the mayor, before that, he was the head of HUD. And I think it was in New York, he was the regional head. And what did he do? He had NYCHA fall apart. They spent more money going to court with residents to not fix their apartments. So it was cheaper to fix them, but they spent, I think, 2.5 times more to go to court to prevent those what do you call it, to fix them, right? I'm sorry, it's late, I'm tired. On the other hand, where did all that money come from? People in NYCHA pay rent. I know there's this whole idea that people in public housing don't work. It's just not true. People do work and they pay rent. Where did all that money go? It didn't go to making any repairs. It went to the Toll Brothers, which at that time was owned by the Rockefellers. That's where all the HUD money went that citizens were paying taxes on and which residents were paying rent. Yeah. Like you were saying, it's just a way to shuffle money away.
Right. I mean,
5 years
yeah, and yeah, go ahead. But this is a
period
common
in which
thing. We
the
have
nation's
relief.
security interests were also firmly safeguarded and its international standing was elevated. Amidst acute and complex international landscape, DPRK successfully implemented an independent and effective national defense policy that curbed power politics and injustice through strength, while upholding national security, sovereign rights, and international justice. Of its paramount strategic significance is the irreversible and permanent establishment of the DPRK's status as a nuclear-armed status. Our nuclear force is currently fulfilling its mission with a sense of responsibility to physically and powerfully deter any war of aggressions. It is the unwavering foreign policy stance of the DPRK to firmly uphold the principles of our struggle against the enemy, strengthen the united front with all the anti-imperialist independent forces, and wage a resolute struggle against imperialist aggressions and war schemes. Nowadays, unimaginable shocking events beyond the common sense are taking place every day, and the wars, bloodshed, political and economic instabilities are becoming a daily occurrence. It is due to the gangster-like geopolitical greed and misuse of strength of the hegemonic forces. As a result, the inter-camp confrontation between the forces for independence or domination is getting more fierce. U.S. high-handed practice have dangerously impacted on its satellite forces and resulted in further deterioration in the bloody situation in Europe and in the Middle East. This invites a serious concern from the international community. Today, the world is witnessing rampant ultranationalism of modern versions such as America First policy, Zionism, Ukrainian neo-Nazism, international instability, reminiscent of the disastrous scene a century ago when a world was involved in wars. At the second plenary meeting of the 9th Central Committee of Workers.
Yeah, so he talks about how the DPRK has had to fortify itself with nuclear weapons, and that they're glad that they have been able to advance their security, because look at the world situation right now. That's basically what they're saying. Look at the world situation right now, and they talk about ultra quote unquote ultra nationalist ideologies and stuff like that. And he lumps in America first, neo-Nazism, and Zionism. Well, I mean, I don't think that Trump is doing America first, and I don't think I wouldn't lump it in all of those together. But I can see where he's coming from. As somebody in the DPRK, and then also, he's saying, look at the pattern here, right? America has these satellites that they're using as battering rams against the anti-imperialist country. And it's ruining the satellite countries. I mean, look at the state of not only Ukraine, but Western Europe that has had their economy absolutely bulldozed because they chose to be used as a battering ram against Russia. I mean, look at the Gulf states right now. I mean, you have these wealthy oil families in the Gulf states who are selling off their assets, who are doing insurance scams and stuff like that, who are unable to do their huge sporting events and stuff like that they used to have for ego trips. There was that story they had to pull their investment from the Met. It was like $1 million because of the increased oil prices and their inability to move stuff through the Strait of Hormuz. And I mean, I feel that should serve as a warning to folks in the Southeast and in the Pacific, to folks in Australia, to folks in Japan or in South Korea. I mean, don't allow yourself to be used as a battering ram against China or the DPRK, because look at what will happen. And that really, what U.S. imperialism is doing is not in the interest of either their satellites or the American people. It's an America last policy. It's an America last policy, as Tim said. It's a Zionism first policy. It's a Wall Street first policy. It's a City of London first policy, and that these ultra nationalist sort of dogs that we are using to attack the people of the world, they don't have our best interests at heart. They're fanatical, crazy people, who they've gotten off the leash. They've gotten off the leash, and they're just rapidly attacking stuff. And we have this government that is like beholden to all of these foreign interests, and at the same time beholden to its own imperialist interest as well, rather than beholden to the American people. I think that's worth pointing out. But do folks have anything to add? No, I think we can move on then.
Korea,
Yeah.
Comrade Kim Jong-un emphasized that we have neither the right nor the grounds to ignore the current complex situation and stark geopolitical reality. He stressed that the strength equates to state sovereignty and prestige, that our state sovereignty and security have been guaranteed like an iron fortress through formidable strength, a fact that will remain unchanged, and that there is nothing to revise or add to this stance, as it represents because it represents an ultimate conclusion drawn up from our party's long history of anti-imperialist struggle. This year too, the US and ROC, Republic of Korea, are pushing with the ROC possession of nuclear submarines while getting more undisguised in their moves towards the reinforcement and modernization of armed forces in the regions. And they staged military drills, espionage act against the DPR Korea, extremely aggravating situation in the Korean Peninsula. Comrade Kim Jong-un clearly reaffirmed
pause here
the
for a
position
second.
of the DPRK to more offensively.
Yeah, he's pointing to a lot of the unrest that is happening in South Korea right now. South Korea is going through a huge amount of turmoil right now. They had that attempted military coup last year, and that South Korea is really coming apart at the seams, while at the same time trying to escalate tensions. And it's like they can't seem to decide the stance that they want to take towards the North. And there are elements within South Korea who would like to see South Korea more independent, whereas the deep state of South Korea is very much tied in with the American deep state apparatus and sort of being an appendage of the U.S. imperialism to be used against the people of against their own people, against the Korean people, against North Korea. And that part of that too is, the jailing of our friends in the Unification Church, of Hak Jahan Moon, who has done a profound amount for unification of the Korean Peninsula, who has done, a whole lot of investment in North Korea, setting up hotels. Their family has set up North Korea's car company, has done a whole lot to advance peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. In fact, a huge part of the reason Trump went there during this first term was because of them. Recently, she's just been thrown in prison as a result of this unfortunate escalation of tensions, because the U.S. imperialists, they really don't know what to do right now. He also reaffirmed there, I thought that was interesting. He reaffirmed that, Korea is often called the hermit kingdom, right? And there's this idea that the North Koreans, they sort of just do their own thing, right? And, they're a hermit kingdom. They're closed off from the rest of the world. Well, it is true that North Korea has their own interests, and that the North Koreans, they do continue to, on their path towards socialism in their own way, and they very much value their sovereignty. But the idea that the DPRK are not having interactions with the rest of the world, I mean, that's just blatantly ahistorical. It's blatantly ahistorical. If you look at the history of the world, if you look at the role that the Korean people have played in the Black liberation struggle and the liberation of the African continent, you look at their solidarity with the people of Zimbabwe. If you look at their solidarity with the people of Angola, their opposition to apartheid South Africa, if you look at their solidarity with the Palestinian people, the fact of the matter is that Kim Il-sung personally adopted a Palestinian child. And from the beginning, they said that, as part of their membership in the non-aligned movement, they were opposed to Zionism. They were opposed to Zionism in the 60s, before it was trendy, that is very much worth pointing out. And that also, a huge part of the boom that North Korea has had in their economy is that they have been able to sell weapons to China and to Russia. They are very, very good at manufacturing arms. They are very, very capable of defending themselves. And that North Korea has been intimately involved in repelling the Ukrainian neo-Nazi forces in Kursk, etc. And that the idea that the DPRK is sort of this, this is something that's often parroted. The DPRK is this ethno-nationalist regime that just, they're Korean supremacists and they don't care about anything else going on in the world besides starving their own people. It's blatantly false, unless you're just believing, everything you read in South Korean tabloids,
And by the way, with the high food prices, we can say the United States government is starving its people. I don't even know how people with children are making it right now.
At the same time, they're cutting food stamps. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, and Medicaid.
trying to get rid of Social Security. Yep.
Yeah, we live in this horrible country called the United States, where the government starves their own people. And we had this famine in the 1930s called the Dust Bowl. And at the same time that millions of people were starving in the streets, the US government was buying up cheese and burying it in a cave just so that people couldn't have it, to keep the dairy farmers in stock,
Yeah, even the country is a lie because we're not very united.
But there you go. Anyway,
Yeah. I just wanted to say I actually
to
knew
expand on
someone.
strengths.
Sorry. I was just gonna say I just actually knew someone's who when I was much younger, this old man, black man, and he told me he owned a farm, and that the United States military basically offered to buy all his pigs, and he did not realize that the military literally came and they buried all his pigs alive. just so that he could not sell them or give them away during the Great Depression, during the Dust Bowl. And he said he would never, ever do that ever again. And they would not allow him to renege on the contract. They literally buried pigs while people were starving in the 1930s. Yes.
Yeah, if you read R. Palm Dutt's Fascism and Social Revolution, he talks about this intimately, how they would bury cows and then they would pour lime over the body so that nobody could dig up the corpse and eat it. Yeah, but Caleb, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, Nelson Peary describes that in his autobiography, Black Radical or Black Fire. He talks about how the government came to every farm in America and killed half the cows. And that was a Great Depression era policy. They just went from farm to farm and killed half the cows, put lime on them, and it was to double the price of beef, right? Like that this was a policy the Roosevelt administration did. The first part of the New Deal was not as good. The first part of the New Deal was just kind of trying to regiment capitalism with these kind of awful policies. The parts that we think about Social Security and all that came later, when Roosevelt was like aligning with the labor unions to defeat the fascist coup against it. But the National Industrial Recovery Act or whatever was pretty awful. And it was basically just all kinds of degrowth measures to try and save capitalism.
Yeah, and that really you can separate the New Deal into two parts. You have the first half, which was sort of flirting with the real definition of fascism, which is a degrowth implemented austerity, and then after you had the industrial capitalists sort of try to overthrow Roosevelt to put in a fascist dictator. Then he was forced to align himself with the communists, and he was much better during the second half, and you had much of the social reforms. And then also you had towards the end of his life, you had sort of a coup happening where Wallace, what was his last name? I'm sorry, my brain's not working. It's
Henry Wallace.
Yeah, Henry Wallace, right? He had been the vice president, and he was forced to give up Henry Wallace as his vice presidential candidate during his last election. And Harry Truman, who had been this horrible anti-communist who hadn't even wanted to be involved in the Second World War, he was sort of inserted into the administration towards the end as Roosevelt was in his twilight years. So that's worth pointing out as well. But yes, anyway, we can continue with the video. We have a little bit more.
Powerful and absolutely reliable self-defense deterrent in response to the prevailing geopolitical crisis. We will remain loyal to the Constitution of the DPRK that permanently enshrines the status of DPRK as a nuclear armed state, and will promote the construction of the multipolar world that guarantees regional and global peace and security. We will also strive for the independence and justice. May I take this opportunity to once again to express my sincere gratitude, Comrade Jyoti, Nina Costa, and Ranjit, and all the members and all the gathered here, who always stood by the DPRK and showed a high level of solidarity towards the DPRK. Words can barely carry the weight of my gratitude I feel in my heart. Thank you very much.
It's a very sweet ending to that. That's the end of his speech. Yeah, I mean, and it goes to show you, I mean, how important the work that we do in the West is when it comes to solidarity with anti-imperialist countries. And, there's a lot of socialist groups, right, that it's a two-sided delusion, right? On the one hand, we're so small and nothing we do matters, right? But on the other hand, I am literally Lenin. And, if Karl Marx was going to be in a revolutionary party, he would be in my tiny communist group. Well, neither of those is true. And, I don't think that any of us would claim to be literally Lenin, or that Karl Marx would. I mean, maybe some of us would, but, none of us would either claim that what we do is unimportant, because what we do is really, really important. The work that we do in the West is very, very important. We are at the center of global imperialism, right? And that the whole world is sort of, looking at us and, what we are doing. Obviously they have their own interests, and they're, They're going to continue to operate as countries in spite of what we do. But it is very, very important, the solidarity that we show. And I think they really do look to us to see, could there be a Western society that could be friendly to us and could have peaceful cooperation. So, never feel like what you're doing is small, or that it's not appreciated around the world. I mean, you should try and get involved in any way that you possibly can. Which brings us to the end of our discussion, and I'd like to point out that speaking of doing things and doing activism in the West to support anti-imperialism, next week we will not be having our Juche study group. I know it's sad. I know many people are going to be in tears. They're going to hear that, and they're not going to know what to do with themselves on a Tuesday night. But Caleb and I and Jessica in particular will be in a van on our way to Chicago for the Center for Political Innovation's national convention, Finish the American Revolution, End the British Empire System and its Wars. We're going to be having our week-long workshop, really training our members to get ready. We're going to be getting ready to have a year where we're really going to grow, and we're going to mature as an organization and really establish roots in our communities and really, really begin to impact conversations where we're locally set up. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. But Tim will be there. He's punched his ticket, and I believe Gavin will be there as well. Not in the van, and neither will Tim be in the van. Unfortunately, I think that would be a little bit too far of a drive. A little out of the way. But I think that we're all going to have a good time in solidarity, and I hope folks will be able to find other ways to do solidarity work with the DPRK in our absence. But do folks have stuff to add? Maybe I think we can go around and talk about how we're looking forward to this. I think that would be a good way to end.
Well, I just wanted to end this show by saying a little bit about North Korea and how I first became interested in North Korea. So growing up, I didn't believe any of the nonsense about North Korea because I came from a very, I guess by European standards, it's left. By American standards, it's left, not necessarily by European standards, but I was doing back in the day, you could go backpacking in Europe when you graduated from college. All you needed was a minimum wage job, and if you worked for a summer, you can go backpacking, and that's what I did. And I think it was in 1995, and I met someone while I was in Vienna, out of all places. I met a Chinese American young lady on the train, and she had told me she had done a whole tour of Asia the year before, and now she was doing a European tour, and she told me she had been to North Korea. And that was like, wow, really? And so we were on the train together for quite a while, and she was telling me about her experiences. And I asked her what made her go to North Korea, and she says, well, as a Chinese American, I hear all these negative things about China that are not true. So I said to myself, wow, let me go to North Korea. And so she got to the border, and they explained to her that, well, you're an American citizen, you have an American passport, it's an issue for you to come into North Korea. And she says, well, what do you mean? You wouldn't allow me into the country? And they said to her, oh, no, that's not the problem. The problem is you can't leave. Says, what do you mean? And she says, well, the United States will revoke your citizenship. And she says, so there's no way for me to enter? And they said, well, sure there is. Just leave your passport here, but make sure you come back here to pick up your passport, and we will give you travel papers. And that's how she came into North Korea. And she had told me that she doesn't speak any Korean, but she found that as she was traveling through the countryside, that there was always someone who was fixing a tractor who's Chinese. So she would always find someone. And she mentioned how she came into this field, and there was a really wonderful woman in the fields, working in the fields. When she had gotten off the bus and walked towards this big, what do you call it, collective. And she was saying she invited her to come. It was lunch, and they had this beautiful lunch. They went to go look for someone in the next village who was Chinese, who spoke Mandarin, who could maybe communicate with her. And she sees that they're campaigning. And finally, the guy who's fixing the tractor, who speaks both Korean and Chinese, he comes and he says, "Oh, the mayor wants to know if you enjoyed the food and you've had a good time. We always want to welcome guests, and we hope that you." And she says, "The mayor? Who's the mayor?" And she says, "What do you mean? The woman right there." And she was just shocked. Like, here's the mayor of the town of this collective, and she's doing farm work. And so she asked her, she says, "You're the mayor?" And she says, "Oh, yeah, and thank God, I've already served my tour of duty." He says, "What?" "Oh, yes. We all have to, like, we all are forced to, like, serve on the council and the mayor, and we all have to take turns because no one wants to do it. Who wants to have the responsibility of having to work in the fields and wanting to be the mayor of the town? That's a lot of hard work." And so she said to me that she had a good laugh, but she found that this was true. And she said that when she finally decided to go back and ask people in some of the major cities like Pyongyang, like for example, she had gone to one of the factories in Pyongyang, and she asked, and she said to the supervisor there, she said, "So how do you determine who runs an election?" And he said to her, "Well, generally in North Korea, every factory they pick whoever they want to pick. They vote on who will represent the factory. And then they'll put up all those candidates and they'll be on the ballot, and whoever has the highest votes becomes the mayor, and the rest become council people. Um, a certain percentage of them, right?" And she said, "Oh, well, then how did that stop the supervisors?" "Oh, no, 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 no. No high supervisors are allowed to run because obviously you can influence in an election, right? You can tell the workers you fire them, threaten them. So, no, that's not allowed. Only low-level supervisors, no high-level supervisors." She says, "Oh, okay." And then she said, "So anyone can run?" And she said, "Sure." Um, "So you mean the guy who like cleans the floor? I'm assuming that's the lowest position you have." And he said, "Well, definitely that's the lowest position we have. He can run?" And he said, "Well, theoretically, yes." And she says, "Oh, but realistically, no." Yeah, yes. And she says, "Well, what's wrong with the man who cleans the floors?" And he explained, "Well, to us, everyone should have the right to have a job if they want one. And so those jobs are usually reserved for people who are mentally challenged. And so theoretically, yes, but realistically, yeah, that's not going to happen." And this was eye-opening. And during our conversations, I asked her, and she says, "You know what? It is the most democratic country I've ever been to my whole life. As I went from town to town and village to village," and by the way, no one was following me, no one was harassing me. I was able to speak to citizens. She says, "In Pyongyang, I can always find easy to find people who spoke Mandarin. As I went into the countryside, it's very difficult." But she says how I can't remember which city it was, but she had gone to another city and she asked how supervisors were picked in the job. And the man explained to her, he says, "Oh, well, we all get turns being supervisors." She says, "What do you mean?" I mean, do you have like a lottery or something?" "Oh, no, we just pick straws, and whoever picks the shortest straw, and well, he's the next supervisor." And and she says, "What?" "Yeah, we all have to take turns, and once you do your round, you don't have a straw, but whoever's left, they have to pick straws." And she had a good laugh at that, but that really was how they decided, because it's a job no one wants. No one wants these jobs. In the United States, there's all this bribery and, under the table money, but you don't have that in North Korea. So that's how I first got very interested in North Korea, because of this young lady who I met on a train. Um, yeah. So that's my story about how I discovered North Korea. And of course, throughout the years, I've met people who are Koreans and who, remember the Korean War and so forth. But really, that was an introduction to modern North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a nice way to end, unless anybody has anything else to add. I would. Oh, Caleb, go ahead.
No, I just I figured before we showed the closing music, I could show the video about CNN admitting North Korea's economy is booming.
Yeah, we can do that. And I'd also like to remind people to please give us money. Us. Donations would be much appreciated, because we do need funds to make sure that we are able to do things comfortably. We don't want to have folks sleeping on floors and stuff like that, because we don't have the amazing. We don't live in Pyongyang, unfortunately. So there we go. Let's play that.
All right. Always told that North Korea is a starving country. Everyone's dying and starving. In the 1990s, there was a food crisis in North Korea, but that's old news. Nowadays, North Korea is doing really, really well. The Wall Street Journal ran a headline about it. Now we have this report from CNN talking about how Pyongyang is booming. Watch.
Driving through Pyongyang, North Korea, American filmmaker and tour guide Justin Martell was absolutely stunned.
Honestly, Pyongyang feels very much like a modern city. We kept joking with our Korean guides that it was Pyongyang.
Entire neighborhoods have sprung up since his last trip in 2017. Fancy restaurants, futuristic skyscrapers.
And they were completely modern restaurants. I was there, we ate there. Western menu, Asian menu, Korean menu, high-end liquor, also car dealerships as well. So if you're staying at the Engakdo International Hotel on one end of the city and you want to go out in Hwasong district, it's going to take you about 40 minutes to get there by taxi, just because of how big the city has now become, how sprawling it is. They have apps on their phones where they can order taxis, order food, use social media.
And not just in the capital. On North Korea's East Coast, Kim built a brand new beach resort, luxury hotels, even a water park, a project President Trump talked about when he met Kim.
They have great beaches. You see that whenever they're exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? So I said, boy, look at that bridge. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And I explained, I said, instead of doing that, you could have the best hotels in the world right there.
So even CNN is admitting that North Korea is an economic hotspot. Their partnership with Russia has caused them to see a real expansion in their economy. Well, we at the Center for Political Innovation, we have been urging people to study the ideology of Juche. We have weekly Juche study groups to study the ideology of Kim Il-sung and the Korean Revolution. We have been marching and advocating better relations with North Korea. The future is in the East. And right now, Kirill Dmitriev and the Russian government are negotiating with the Trump administration about the possibility of building a peace tunnel or peace bridge over the Bering Sea. The Center for Political Innovation, we have been the loudest voices advocating the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Things are very, very exciting right now. And the fact that mainstream media outlets in America are admitting that the socialist economy of North Korea is doing very, very well, that shows you that there is potential for peace and diplomatic relations. Look, the only future America is going to have is with the rising new economy in the East. This dying Western system of imperialism, globalism, where the big monopolies and the old British Empire elite rule the world and keep the world poor, that's the past. There's a whole new economy rising in the East, and North Korea is a big part of it, and they are booming. And America needs to get in on the action and start trading with North Korea, with Russia, with China. We need to be part of the rising new economy.
Dare to struggle, dare to win. 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 Dare to struggle, dare to win.
One last thing before we go. Speaking of tourism in the DPRK, anytime I see on TikTok, I frequently see people who visit China and they go to the North Korean restaurant. Same with people who visit Moscow or St. Petersburg. That North Korea and anti-imperialist countries have like North Korean restaurants, like North Korean steakhouses. Wouldn't it be so awesome to go to one of those in the U.S.? The food looks really good. But anyway, I think we can have a good night, everybody. This has been a great session.